I'm sorry, Elena, but I've decided to put the house in your cousin's names instead. My mother's words hung in the air between us like a slap I could still feel stinging my cheek. The kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd spent countless hours helping her prepare Sunday dinners, suddenly felt smaller, suffocating. Through the window I could see my cousins Michael and Thomas in the backyard, laughing as they grilled steaks for the family gathering. Mom, we talked about this. You promised that after I helped with the renovations. I know what I said. She wouldn't meet my eyes, busying herself with the potato salad. But the boys need a foundation. Michael has his wedding next year, and Thomas will want to start a family soon. What would you do with property anyway? You're still figuring things out. I was 30 years old with a stable job in marketing. Still figuring things out, had been her assessment of me since I was 16. I've been paying half your mortgage for 3 years, I said quietly. I put my savings into the new roof and kitchen. And I'm grateful. She finally looked at me, her expression a practiced mixture of pity and condescension I'd seen my entire life. But blood matters, Elena. They're your uncle's sons. They lost their father. They deserve more. Those words, they deserve more, echoed in my head. They were the same words she'd used when she'd given them my college fund after Uncle Rob died, forcing me to work through school. The same justification when she'd spent my birthdays taking them shopping. The same explanation when Christmas meant new gaming systems for them and discount store clothes for me. I placed my hands flat on the counter to steady myself. Through the window, I could see my Aunt Sharon watching us, her face a mask of fake sympathy. She'd always encouraged this. Her nephews benefiting at my expense. You're a girl, my mother continued, reaching to pat my hand. I pulled away before she could touch me. You'll find a nice man who'll provide for you. The boys need to build their futures. Something inside me, something that had been bending for decades, finally snapped. I've been providing for myself and helping provide for you since I was 17, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. And all I've heard my entire life is how my cousins deserve more than me. Elena, you're being dramatic. I'm being honest. For once. I reached for my purse on the counter. You know what? You're right. They can have the house. All of it. I don't want anything from you anymore. My mother's expression changed to one I rarely saw directed at me. Concern. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm done. I felt strangely calm as I slid the house key off my keyring and placed it on the counter. I'm done trying to earn a place in this family. I'm done being told I deserve less because I'm just a girl. I'm done with all of it. You can't just walk away from family, my mother said, raising her voice. Through the window, I could see my cousins looking toward the house. Watch me. As I walked toward the door, she called after me. You'll come back. You always do. Where will you even go? What will you do? You can't make it alone, Elena. I turned one last time, looking at the woman who had systematically taught me I was worth less than the boys in the family. I guess we'll find out. I walked out of the house I'd helped pay for, past my cousins who called out to ask where I was going, and into my car. As I drove away, I could see my mother in the rearview mirror, standing in the doorway. I was 30 years old and I was finally free. My apartment felt emptier than usual that night. Sitting cross-legged on my bed, I stared at my bank account balance on my laptop screen. $8,742.16. Not nothing, but not much to show for years of work while subsidizing my mother's household. 3 missed calls from Mom. 5 text messages from my cousins ranging from "WTF happened?" to "You're breaking your mom's heart." I turned off my phone. What now, Elena? I asked myself, the question echoing in my sparse bedroom. I'd always been good at my marketing job, creating campaigns, understanding what people wanted before they knew they wanted it. But I'd stayed at the same mid-level position for years, too busy helping my mother to pursue advancement. My colleague Diane had been trying to recruit me to join her fledgling digital marketing agency for months. You're wasting your talent, she told me just last week. You could be making twice what you make now if you weren't so afraid to take risks. Was I afraid? Or just conditioned to believe I didn't deserve more? I opened my laptop again and typed an email to Diane. I'm in. Let's talk terms tomorrow. The next morning, I walked into my boss's office and resigned from my position. Timothy looked genuinely shocked. I'd been a reliable, if unambitious, employee for 7 years. Is this about money? Because we can discuss a raise. It's about believing I deserve more, I said, surprising myself with my candor. And it's time I stopped waiting for other people to give me permission to succeed. 2 weeks later, I was sitting in a tiny rented office space with Diane, poring over potential client lists. We need to establish ourselves with a signature success, Diane said, tapping her pen against her coffee cup. One big client who can put us on the map. I stared at the list of potential targets, my mind racing. One name stood out, Harriet Winters, the founder of Winter Home Goods, a regional company that had been struggling since larger chains moved into the area. This one, I said, pointing to the name. She built her business from nothing 30 years ago. She's losing market share, but she has loyal customers. She just doesn't know how to reach them in the digital age. Diane looked skeptical. She's turned down every marketing agency in the city. Because they're all run by men who want to completely change her brand identity, I said, remembering the tone-deaf campaigns I'd seen targeting Winter Home Goods demographic. We're going to offer something different. It took 3 attempts to get a meeting with Harriet Winters. When we finally sat across from her in her cluttered office above her flagship store, the 65-year-old woman looked at us with undisguised skepticism. I've heard all the pitches, she said, waving her hand dismissively. Make everything modern, appeal to millennials, throw out everything I've built. No thank you. That's not what we're here to offer, I said before Diane could speak. Your brand has integrity. Your customers trust you. We don't want to change that, we want to amplify it. Harriet raised an eyebrow. Go on. Your competitors are trying to be everything to everyone. Their marketing is generic, soulless. Your strength is that you understand your core customers, women who value quality, craftsmanship, and tradition. We want to use digital platforms to tell your story to people who don't know they're looking for exactly what you offer. For the next hour, I outlined a strategy that would honor Winter Home Goods' heritage while expanding its reach. When I finished, Harriet studied me for a long moment. Everyone wants to tell me how to change, she said finally. You're the first person who seems to understand what I've been trying to preserve. We left with a signed contract. Winter Home Goods would be our first major client. Later that night, as Diane and I celebrated over cheap wine in our tiny office, she raised her glass. To believing you deserve more. Whatever lit that fire under you, I'm glad it happened. I thought of my mother's words, they deserve more, and raised my own glass, to proving them wrong. 6 months later, Winter Home Goods sales had increased by 32%. Our phones wouldn't stop ringing with potential clients. We hired our first 2 employees and moved to a larger office space. 1 year after walking away from my mother's house, I hadn't taken a single one of her calls. Each time her number appeared on my screen, I heard those words again. They deserve more. I was determined to prove that I deserved everything I was building for myself. 3 years after my departure from my mother's life, Resonant Digital, the name Diane and I had chosen for our agency, had grown to a team of 15. We'd established ourselves as specialists in revitalizing traditional businesses with authentic digital strategies. My apartment was now a spacious loft in a renovated downtown building, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't counting every dollar I spent. On a crisp autumn morning, I arrived at the office to find Diane practically vibrating with excitement. You're not going to believe who called for a meeting, she said, practically pulling me into our conference room. Based on your expression, either Ryan Reynolds or a potential client with an unlimited budget. Better. She slid a folder across the table. Craftwell Home Stores. I froze. Craftwell was the chain that had moved into our region 5 years ago, decimating local businesses like Winter Home Goods with their lower prices and aggressive marketing. They want to hire us? I asked incredulously. Why would we work with them? They're everything we position our clients against. Diane's expression turned serious. Because they're offering enough money to double our revenue this year. And because they're struggling, turns out, their soulless approach is losing steam as consumers become more conscientious. I opened the folder. The proposed contract was indeed staggering. More money than we'd made in the past 2 years combined. This feels wrong, I said quietly. Harriet trusts us. Harriet is one client, Elena. This is business. Diane sighed. Look, I know you have personal attachments to our origin story, but we have 15 people depending on us making smart decisions for the company. I thought about our team, about the responsibility we'd taken on as employers. But I also thought about Harriet Winters, who'd believed in us when no one else would. I need to think about this, I said, closing the folder. That afternoon, I visited Harriet's store. I found her in her usual spot, arranging a display of handcrafted table linens. Elena, she greeted me warmly. I was just about to call you. The response to our autumn campaign has been wonderful. I helped her straighten a stack of napkins, feeling the weight of the Craftwell offer like a stone in my stomach. Harriet, how bad was it when Craftwell first came to town? Her hands stilled. Why do you ask? I'm just trying to understand the business landscape better. She turned to face me fully. They nearly destroyed everything I'd built. Not just me, all the small businesses like mine. They undercut our prices, copied our products with cheaper materials, poached our staff with slightly better wages. She sighed. But you know what the worst part was? They made people forget the value of what we offered. Everything became disposable. On my drive back to the office, I called Diane. We're turning down Craftwell, I said when she answered. Elena, we're turning them down, but I have another idea. Get the team together. 2 days later, I presented my alternative strategy to our staff. Instead of helping Craftwell, we would launch a consortium of independent home goods retailers, with Winter Home Goods as the flagship member. We would pool resources to create a unified digital presence and logistics network that could compete with the big chains while preserving each store's unique identity. It's risky, our financial officer pointed out. The immediate payoff is much smaller than the Craftwell contract. Yes, I agreed. But the long-term potential is greater. And more importantly, it aligns with who we are. We didn't build Resonant Digital to help Goliath beat David. We built it to give David a fighting chance. The vote among our leadership team was unanimous. We turned down Craftwell and launched what would become Home Heart Alliance, a network of independent home goods retailers united by quality, craftsmanship, and community roots. 6 months later, the alliance had 28 member businesses across 3 states. A year after that, we'd expanded to 72 stores nationwide, with Resonant Digital managing the unified e-commerce platform and marketing strategy. By the time I turned 35, I was CEO of both Resonant Digital and Home Heart Alliance. My decision to walk away from the easy money had led to something far more valuable, a business model that was revolutionizing how independent retailers could thrive in the age of big box stores and e-commerce giants. In quiet moments, I sometimes wondered if my mother had any idea what I'd built. I still hadn't spoken to her in 5 years. Occasionally, I'd get messages from cousins Michael and Thomas, usually when they needed something. I never responded. They deserve more, she'd said. But I was beginning to understand just how much I deserved too. Ms. Vasquez? There's a call for you online too. The woman says she's your Aunt Sharon. I stared at my assistant Becca in disbelief. I was sitting in my corner office on the 15th floor of the building that now housed both my companies. It had been nearly 10 years since I'd walked out of my mother's house. 10 years of building something that even I couldn't have imagined that day. Did she say what she wants? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Just that it's urgent. Family matter. Family matter. As if we were still a family. I'll take it, I said, reaching for the phone once Becca had closed the door behind her. Elena. My aunt's voice sounded older, but the manipulative edge was unmistakable. Thank God I found you. We've been trying to reach you for weeks. What do you want, Sharon? I kept my tone professional, the same voice I used in difficult negotiations. It's your mother. A pause calculated for effect. She's sick, Elena. Really sick. Cancer. The doctors are saying months, not years. The news hit me like a physical blow, but I remained silent. She's been asking for you, Sharon continued when I didn't respond. The boys and I have been taking care of her, but she needs to see you. The boys. My cousins would be pushing 40 now, but they were still the boys who deserved more. I'm sorry to hear about Mom's illness, I said finally, but I'm not sure what you expect from me after all this time. She's your mother, Elena. Sharon's voice rose with indignation. Whatever happened between you? What happened is that she systematically favored your sons at my expense my entire life, I interrupted calmly. And when I finally stood up for myself, she told me I would fail without her. People say things they don't mean when they're upset. Where is she now? I asked, cutting off what was sure to be a defense of the indefensible. At home. The same house. A hesitation. Your cousins moved in to help care for her. Of course they had. The house that should have been partially mine, the house I'd helped pay for, was now surely their inheritance. I'll think about it, I said. Send me her doctor's information. I want to speak with them directly. After hanging up, I stood at my office window looking out at the city skyline. I had built 2 successful companies, employed over 200 people, and changed the way independent retailers did business. I had proven my mother wrong in every possible way. And yet, hearing she was dying stirred something in me I thought I'd buried. The little girl who had desperately wanted her mother's approval. The next day, I had my private investigator confirm Sharon's story. My mother had stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Her prognosis was indeed measured in months. I arranged a call with her oncologist, who confirmed the details clinically and efficiently. At the end of our conversation, he paused. Ms. Vasquez, I don't know the history here, but your mother mentions you frequently. She keeps a newspaper article about your business success in her hospital room. That night, I sat in my penthouse apartment, staring at my phone. Finally, I dialed the number I deleted but never forgotten. My mother answered on the 3rd ring, her voice thinner than I remembered. Hello. Mom, I said, the word feeling strange after so many years. It's Elena. Her sharp intake of breath was followed by a moment of silence. Then, Elena. You called. Aunt Sharon told me you're sick. Yes. No self-pity in her voice, just weary acceptance. The doctors are doing what they can, but I'd like to come see you, I said, surprising myself with the words. Another silence. I'd like that very much. 2 days later, I found myself driving down the familiar street toward my mother's house. I'd taken a commercial flight rather than using the company jet. Something about returning to my hometown made me want to appear less changed than I was. The house looked smaller than I remembered. The yard was overgrown, the paint peeling, signs of neglect that would have been unthinkable when I lived there. My cousin Michael opened the door before I could knock. He'd gained weight, his hairline receding, but his expression of entitled superiority hadn't changed. Well, look who finally showed up, he said, not moving to let me in. 10 years without a word. And now you appear when there might be something to inherit. I met his gaze steadily. If I were interested in inheritance, I would have stayed and fought for what I helped pay for. Now, are you going to let me see my mother? Or should I call her doctor about a patient being denied visitors? His face flushed, but he stepped aside. The interior of the house was as neglected as the exterior. Dishes piled in the sink, dust on the surfaces, a stale smell in the air. My mother was in her bedroom, propped up on pillows. She had always been a robust woman, but the person before me was a shadow, thin, pale, her once dark hair now completely white and thin. But her eyes, those sharp, assessing eyes, were the same. Elena, she said softly as I entered the room. You came. I sat in the chair beside her bed. I came. For a moment we simply looked at each other. A decade of silence between us. You've done well for yourself, she said finally. I see your name in the business papers. Yes, I replied. I have. Your cousins tell me you own 2 companies now. I nodded. Resonant Digital and Home Heart Alliance. She smoothed her blanket with trembling hands. I always knew you were smart. The words stung with their implicit limitation, smart but not deserving. Not worth investing in. Why did you ask to see me, Mom? I asked directly. It's been 10 years. Why now? She looked away toward the window. Because I'm dying. And because... Her voice faltered. Because I was wrong about you. Of all the things I had imagined my mother might say to me after 10 years, this was not one of them. I sat perfectly still, afraid that any movement might break whatever had finally cracked open in her. I was wrong, she repeated, turning back to me. And I've had a lot of time to think about just how wrong I was. I don't understand, I said, studying my mother's gaunt face. What exactly were you wrong about? She gestured weakly toward a glass of water on her bedside table. I handed it to her, our fingers brushing briefly, the first physical contact we'd had in a decade. After taking a sip, she said, Everything. I was wrong about everything when it came to you, Elena. From the hallway, I could hear my cousins talking, their voices carrying that familiar entitled tone. My mother noticed my distraction. They're discussing what to do with the house, she said quietly. They've been living here rent-free for 3 years, but neither wants to buy the other out after I'm gone. I felt a surge of bitterness. The house I helped pay for. Yes. She didn't deny it. The house you helped pay for. That I put in their names because I thought. She sighed. Because I thought boys needed a foundation more than girls. Because that's what my mother taught me, and her mother taught her. I remained silent, letting her continue. When you walked out that day, I was so angry. I told everyone you were being dramatic, ungrateful. She took another sip of water. But then months passed. You didn't call. You didn't come back. And I started seeing things differently. Through the window, I could see the backyard where my cousins had always played while I helped in the kitchen. I had accepted these differences as natural for so long. Michael and Thomas moved in after their latest divorces, my mother continued. Neither keeps a steady job. They take what they want and expect more. She looked directly at me. Meanwhile, I read about you in the business section. I saw you on the cover of Entrepreneur magazine. I remembered that cover. Elena Vasquez. How she's saving Main Street retailers. It had been a proud moment, one I had no one to share with. I was raised to believe women needed to be protected, provided for, my mother said. That independence was something only men could achieve. Watching you prove that wrong has been. She searched for the word. Illuminating. Illuminating, I repeated. The word feeling insufficient for the years of favoritism and dismissal. And devastating, she added, surprising me again. Because I realized how much I'd stolen from you. Opportunities, support, belief. My throat tightened. You gave it all to Michael and Thomas. Yes. And look at them now. She gestured vaguely toward the hallway. They're still waiting for someone to provide for them. Still expecting more without earning it. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of her admission filling the space between us. Why are they here? I asked finally. If you see them so clearly now. Because they're family, she said simply. And because I owed them to, I raised them to be dependent, entitled. That's on me as much as what I did to you. I leaned back in my chair, processing her words. So what do you want from me now, Mom? Forgiveness? It's been 10 years. No. She shook her head slowly. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted a chance to tell you that I see you now. I see what you've built, who you've become, despite me, not because of me. She paused. And I wanted to fix one thing before I die. From beneath her pillow, she withdrew an envelope and handed it to me. Inside was a legal document, a revised deed to the house, with my name added alongside my cousin's. It's not much compared to what you have now, she said. But it's what I can do. Before I could respond, the bedroom door opened and Thomas stepped in, his expression darkening when he saw the envelope in my hand. What's that? He demanded, looking between us. It's none of your business, Thomas, my mother said, a firmness in her voice I'd rarely heard directed at my cousins. It looks like paperwork, he persisted, stepping further into the room. Are you giving her something? After she abandoned you for 10 years. I'm correcting a mistake, my mother replied. The house should always have been partly Elena's. I've made that right. Thomas's face flushed with anger. You can't do that. Michael and I have been taking care of you. We've been here. Taking care of me? My mother laughed weakly. The house is a mess. I've been paying all the bills from my savings. You've been here because you have nowhere else to go. I stood up, placing myself between Thomas and my mother's bed. I think you should leave us to talk privately. This is my house, he shouted, his voice carrying through the hall. Footsteps approached rapidly, and Michael appeared in the doorway. What's going on? Mom, you need to rest, Michael said, glaring at me as if I were agitating her. Your mother was just explaining how she's updated the deed to the house, I said calmly. I'm now an equal owner alongside both of you. What? Michael's shock quickly turned to outrage. That's not possible. We've been living here, taking care of her. Let's be honest, I interrupted. You've been living here because you both failed at your marriages and careers. You haven't been taking care of anyone but yourselves. How dare you? Thomas stepped toward me aggressively. You know nothing about our lives. I know enough, I replied, not backing down. I know that you're still expecting things to be handed to you, Still believing you deserve more without earning it. My mother's voice cut through the tension. That's enough. All of you. She struggled to sit up straighter. This is my decision. The house will be divided equally 3 ways. If you can't accept that, Thomas Michael, you can leave now. The stunned silence that followed was broken by the sound of my phone ringing. I checked it. It was Diane, probably with news about our latest acquisition. I need to take this, I said, stepping toward the door. We can continue this conversation later. As I walked past my cousins, Michael grabbed my arm. You don't belong here anymore. You made your choice 10 years ago. I removed his hand firmly. Actually, it seems I do belong here. At least according to the deed. I looked back at my mother. I'll come back tomorrow. We have more to discuss. Outside in the fresh air, I answered Diane's call while walking to my rental car. Elena? Where are you? The Westbrook team is waiting for our final offer. I leaned against the car, looking back at the house of my childhood, the sight of so much pain and now, unexpectedly, a kind of reckoning. I'm in my hometown, I said. Family matter. Tell them we'll meet their price but not their timeline. We need 2 more weeks for due diligence. Are you okay? Diane asked, concern in her voice. You never take personal time. I watched as Thomas stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him. I'm fine. Just tying up some loose ends from the past. As I hung up, I realized that for the first time in a decade, I'd have to figure out how to reconcile the life I'd built with the family I'd left behind. And I wasn't sure if that was even possible. Over the next 3 weeks, I established a temporary office in my hotel suite, running both companies remotely while spending afternoons with my mother. Her condition deteriorated rapidly. The doctors had been optimistic in their months estimate. My cousins maintained a cold distance, appearing at the house only when I wasn't there. Through the home health aide I'd hired, I learned they were furious about the deed change but helpless to challenge it. On a rainy Thursday afternoon, as I sat beside my mother's bed reading to her from a novel she'd always loved, she interrupted me. I want to see it, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. See what, Mom? Your company. What you've built. Show me. I hesitated, then reached for my tablet. I pulled up a presentation I'd recently given to investors, showing the growth of Home Heart Alliance across the country, hundreds of independent retailers now thriving under our unified platform. This is the Alliance headquarters, I explained, showing her photos of our modern offices. And these are some of our member stores. She studied each image carefully, her eyes lingering on a photo of me speaking at our annual conference, addressing a room of business owners who had once been on the verge of closing their doors. You did this, she said, not a question but an affirmation. You built all of this. I did, I agreed. With a lot of hard work and good people around me. And no help from your family. Her voice carried a heaviness that went beyond her physical weakness. I put the tablet down. Mom, why did you really change the deed? It's not like I need the house now. She looked out the window at the rain pattering against the glass. Because symbols matter. That house represented everything I got wrong. Choosing your cousins over you. Believing they deserved more simply because they were boys. She turned back to me. I couldn't change the past, but I could correct that one thing. And what about Michael and Thomas? What happens to them? A sad smile crossed her face. They'll have to learn what you've known for years, that the world doesn't owe you anything, that you have to build your own worth. She reached for my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. I failed all 3 of you but in different ways. I made you doubt your value, and I made them never question theirs. 2 days later, I received an urgent call from the home health aide. My mother had taken a turn for the worse. By the time I reached the house, my cousins were already there, standing awkwardly in the hallway as medical personnel moved in and out of her room. For once, we acknowledged each other without hostility. Just 3 people united by the impending loss of the woman who had shaped us all, for better or worse. She's asking for all of you, the hospice nurse said, emerging from the bedroom. Together we entered the room. My mother looked impossibly small in the hospital bed that had replaced her queen-sized mattress. Her breathing was labored, her eyes struggling to focus as we approached. My children, she whispered, though only one of us was actually her child. Come closer. We gathered around her bed, me on one side, Michael and Thomas on the other. She reached for our hands, creating a circle of connection. I need to say this while I still can, she began, each word an effort. I made mistakes with all of you. Elena. Her eyes found mine. I never gave you the belief you deserved. I made you think you were less valuable because you were a girl. I was wrong. So wrong. Tears stung my eyes as I squeezed her hand gently. She turned to my cousins. And you boys. I gave you everything without asking anything in return. I made you think the world would always provide for you. That was wrong too. Michael looked away, but Thomas held her gaze, his own eyes glistening. I can't undo the damage, my mother continued. But I can ask you to learn from each other. Thomas, Michael, look at what Elena has built through her own determination. And Elena, she squeezed my hand. Don't let bitterness keep you from the family you still have, flawed as we are. None of us spoke, the only sound in the room the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor and the rain against the windows. Promise me, she whispered, her voice fading. Promise you'll try. I promise, I said softly, surprising myself with how much I meant it. After a moment's hesitation, my cousins murmured their agreement as well. My mother died 3 days later, slipping away peacefully in her sleep. The funeral was small, her few remaining friends, some distant relatives, and the three of us standing together at the graveside. As the service concluded, I approached my cousins. We need to talk about the house. Thomas stiffened, but Michael nodded. Yes, we do. We met at a nearby coffee shop, 3 middle-aged people with a lifetime of complicated history between us. I don't want the house, I said after we'd settled with our drinks. I'll sign my portion over to both of you with conditions. They exchanged glances. What conditions? Thomas asked warily. I leaned forward. You both need to find jobs. Real jobs, not the part-time consulting you've been coasting on for years. And you need to maintain the house properly or sell it and split the proceeds. Why would you give up your share? Michael asked suspiciously. It's worth a lot of money. Because I don't need it, I replied simply. And because I made a promise to Mom. Thomas studied me for a long moment. I applied for a job last week, he said finally. Regional sales manager at a manufacturing company. I have an interview on Tuesday. I nodded, encouraged by this small step. Good. That's a start. I've been thinking about going back to school, Michael added hesitantly. Finish my degree. Maybe teach. I could help with that, I offered. The Alliance has a scholarship program for adult learners. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table as we contemplated this tentative truce, this fragile beginning. She kept every article about you, Thomas said suddenly. In a scrapbook by her bed. Everything she could find about your success. I hadn't known that. She never told me. She was proud of you, Michael added, and ashamed that she hadn't supported you. She talked about you all the time these last few years. The revelation settled over me like a gentle weight. All those years of silence, and she had been watching my journey from afar, collecting the evidence of what I had become despite her lack of faith in me. We were jealous, Thomas admitted, not meeting my eyes. When we saw what you built, the success you had, it was easier to resent you than to admit we'd wasted the advantages we were given. I don't want your resentment or your envy, I said quietly. And I don't want the house. I want us to honor the promise we made to Mom, to learn from each other, to be better than we were. 6 months later, I stood in the freshly renovated living room of my mother's house, now legally owned by my cousins, who had both made good on their promises to find stable employment. Thomas had gotten the sales job, and Michael was halfway through his teaching certification program, funded by a Home Heart Alliance scholarship. It looks good, I said, admiring the new paint and furniture. You've done well with it. Thanks for the contractor recommendations, Michael said, a new humility in his manner. And for not giving up on us entirely. I smiled. Family is complicated, but it's still family. As I prepared to leave for the airport, back to my life, my companies, the world I had built, Thomas handed me a package wrapped in simple brown paper. We found this when we were cleaning out Mom's things, he explained. We thought you should have it. Alone in my hotel room that night, I unwrapped the package to find the scrapbook they had mentioned. Every article, every achievement of mine carefully preserved. On the inside cover, in my mother's handwriting, were words I had waited a lifetime to hear. Elena, you proved me wrong in the most beautiful way. You deserved everything you built and more. I'm sorry I couldn't see it sooner. With pride and regret, Mom. 10 years after walking away with nothing but determination, I had built everything my mother said I couldn't. More importantly, I had proven to myself what I was worth, not because someone handed it to me, but because I had created it through my own vision and effort. And in the end, my success had accomplished what years of arguing never could. It had forced my mother to see her own mistakes, to acknowledge my value, and to speak the words I had always needed to hear. I was wrong about you. As I boarded my private jet the next morning, back to the empire I had built, to the 200 employees who depended on me, to the business that had revolutionized an industry, I carried that scrapbook with me, a reminder of how far I had come in the difficult, necessary journey that had brought me here. Sometimes you have to walk away to find your true worth. Sometimes you have to build your own vindication. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you get to come full circle, not to erase the past, but to make peace with it on your own terms. 2 years later. And that concludes my keynote address. Thank you for having me today. The applause was thunderous as I stepped away from the podium. The annual Women in Business Conference had chosen me as their featured speaker, and I had shared parts of my journey, the early struggles building Resonant Digital and Home Heart Alliance, and the lessons learned along the way. As I made my way through the crowd accepting congratulations and business cards, I spotted two familiar figures at the back of the ballroom, Michael and Thomas, looking uncomfortable in suits but smiling proudly. You came, I said when I reached them, genuinely surprised. They lived 3 states away, and we maintained a cordial but distant relationship, connected by monthly calls and occasional visits. Wouldn't miss it, Michael said. He was now a high school business teacher, using his own failures and late-found success as teaching tools for his students. Besides, we wanted to tell you the news in person. What news? Thomas grinned. We're opening a store under the Home Heart banner. Small local home goods with a focus on regional artisans. Your team approved our business plan last week. I stared at them in shock. You didn't tell me you were applying. We wanted to earn it on our own merits, Thomas explained. No special treatment because we're your cousins. I felt a surge of emotion, pride in them, closure for myself, and somewhere, I imagined my mother watching with satisfaction as her final wish came true. We were learning from each other after all. Congratulations, I said sincerely. Welcome to the alliance. Later that evening, in my penthouse overlooking the city I had conquered, I opened my mother's scrapbook to the last page, where I had added my own contribution after her death, a photo of the 3 of us at her funeral, standing together despite our complicated history. Beside it, I placed a new photograph. The 3 of us at the conference, 2 budding entrepreneurs and the CEO who had once been told she deserved less than them. We all deserved more, I whispered to the empty room. And we all found it in our own way.